I hate to break it to you, but my girlfriend, who's 20 years younger, is pregnant. I prefer younger girls, so I'm getting a divorce. Cool with you? Fine, get a divorce if you want, but make sure you take good care of our son. Huh? You should take the boy with you. Haven't you spoiled him enough? No, I can't because he is. I stopped myself. If this conversation stayed between us, it wouldn't be a problem, but Ken could hear us from his room. What would he think if he overheard this? That was my only concern. Still, I had to respond. Ted needed to understand the gravity of the situation. Destroying our happiness to chase his own selfish desires was unacceptable. I wouldn't stand for it. If our happiness was being taken away, I wanted to take his away too. Driven by these feelings, I decided to confront Ted with a shocking truth. My name is Mila Davis. I'm 41 years old. I live with my husband Ted and our high school junior son Ken. I married Ted 13 years ago when I was 28. Back then, I was an insurance saleswoman, visiting various companies to sell insurance. That's how I met Ted. Ted was working at a local import-export business and had just divorced his wife. My wife cheated on me and left. Now I'm living with my 5-year-old son. It's just the two of us, and it's pretty lonely, he said, looking somewhat sorrowful. Every time I visited Ted's company for work, we started talking more. Eventually, Ted asked me, "Would you like to go out together?" But we never went out, just the two of us. Ted always brought his son Ken along. He can't stay at home alone, right? I'd really love for you to be my son's new mom, but I guess you wouldn't want to marry a man with a child. Seeing him like that, I thought he truly cherished his child. If he could care for a child like that, surely he'd care for his family. So I decided to marry Ted. But it was all a performance to marry me. As soon as we got married, Ted changed. I quit my job and became a housewife, taking on all the housework and childcare. That wasn't a problem, but Ted started neglecting Ken. Before our marriage, he brought Ken along on our dates, but after our marriage, he didn't even look at Ken. Not just on weekdays, but even on weekends, Ted never talked to Ken. He never took Ken out, never played with him, nothing. Even after Ken started elementary school, Ted's attitude didn't change. I went to all the school events alone. Ted ignored every event that parents should attend and enjoy together. You could at least attend some of Ken's school events, I said. Ted grimaced and sighed in annoyance. Sorry, but I'm just too tired from work. But, oh, be quiet. Taking care of our son is your job as his mother, right? Just do it properly, he shouted, ending the conversation abruptly. What happened to the man I knew before we got married? I felt a twinge of regret. One day, Ken had just come home from elementary school and was helping me prepare dinner when a message from Ted arrived on my phone. Wait, what? He's bringing his subordinates home now? Apparently, he was going to bring several colleagues over. Ted had just been promoted to team leader and likely wanted to build rapport with his new subordinates. What should I do? We don't have enough food stored. They'll surely end up drinking here, and we'll need some snacks. It's less than an hour's drive from his office to our home. After some thought, I decided to go to the nearby supermarket to buy ingredients. When I got home, I started cooking in a hurry. I'll help too, Ken offered. Oh, thank you. Could you please set the table? We worked as quickly as we could, but there were limits. Ted arrived home when only about half of the preparations were done. I'm home. Hey, I brought my colleagues, Ted shouted from the entrance. I greeted them briefly and led them to the living room, serving them beer and snacks. As I was preparing the next dish, Ted came into the kitchen and asked, Hey, what's happening with the food? I'm cooking right now. There are snacks, so it should be okay for now. What have you been doing? I told you in advance. If you could notify me a bit earlier. Stop complaining. You should have this ready. Do you want me to be embarrassed? Ted shouted at me, leaving me speechless. There were countless things I wanted to say, but the sound from the kitchen could be heard in the living room. The guests must have felt uncomfortable too. Thinking of that, I held my tongue and silently endured the evening. Once the guests had left, Ted and I had a big fight. I was furious at him for shouting at me just because of his own poor planning. Ted puckered his lips and said childishly, Fine, I'll have parties at venues from now on. Happy now. After that, Ted started going out more often. His spending became more extravagant, and he would leave early on his days off. By then, Ken was in 7th grade, and expenses for after-school programs and other activities were increasing. That's when I talked to Ted about wanting to start a part-time job. A part-time job? What, you want money for leisure? Ted's response seemed careless, perhaps due to being drunk, but I took it as his agreement nonetheless. So, I started working as an insurance agent part-time. I reached out to a former boss for my pre-marriage job and secured the position. It was a balancing act, though, as Ted would often complain about housework not being done despite my part-time job. I had to manage my time efficiently, ensuring dinner was ready before Ted returned home. One day, work ran late unexpectedly. Rushing home, I found Ted already there, his expression sullen. "Where have you been?" he demanded. "I was at my part-time job." "Part-time job? You weren't cheating on me, were you?" Ted stared at me suspiciously. "That's ridiculous," I replied firmly, but Ted wasn't convinced. He reached for my phone. "Let me see. I'll check if there are any men's names." "Stop it." "Shut up." Ted forcefully took my phone and started checking my contacts. He quickly found my boss's name. "Who's this? A man's name, huh?" "That's my boss." "He's your lover, isn't he?" "Fine." Before I could stop him, Ted dialed my boss's number. "Stop it. You just keep quiet." Thankfully, the misunderstanding was quickly resolved. I apologized profusely to my boss and urged Ted to do the same, but he simply looked away. "It's your fault for making it look like you're doing something wrong," he muttered repeatedly. From then on, our relationship continued to deteriorate. Even when Ken entered ninth grade, nothing changed. I questioned whether this relationship was sustainable, but couldn't find a way to mend it. Before I knew it, Ken was a senior in high school preparing for college. Recently, Ted and I barely argued at home. At least this wouldn't affect Ken's studies. I figured we could maintain this status quo until Ken went to college. That's what I thought. Then one day, I found myself near Ted's workplace for my job. If things were good between us, I'd invite him to lunch, I muttered to myself. As I looked across the intersection, I spotted Ted's car. Wait, is that Ted? And who is with him? Squinting, I saw two people laughing and chatting together. The word infidelity flashed in my mind. Accusing others of infidelity while doing it yourself. What a hypocritical situation. I was too stunned to say anything. Quietly, I took a picture of them and decided to consult a private detective to investigate Ted. I probably already know the answer, I thought. Divorce was already on my mind, but having concrete evidence would be crucial. So I waited anxiously for the results of the investigation. About a month later, the results arrived, and they were damning. He had truly crossed the line. Just divorcing him didn't seem sufficient anymore. I needed to figure out how to make him pay. On a particular day off, lost in my thoughts, Ted, who was supposed to be out, unexpectedly returned home early. Hurrying towards me, he blurted out, "I'm sorry, but my girlfriend, who's 20 years younger, is pregnant." What? I couldn't believe what I was hearing. But there he stood, a smirk playing on his lips as he continued, "Yeah, my girlfriend, who's 20 years younger, is pregnant. I prefer younger women, so I'm going to divorce you. That's cool with you, right?" Well, at least he had the audacity to confess his affair himself. However, I saw this as a golden opportunity. With determination in mind, I decided to seize the moment. "Go ahead and get married, but please take care of our son," I said with a smile, catching Ted off guard. "What? You should take our son with you. You've always been so fond of him." "I won't because that boy is." I chose my words carefully. "Ken, studying in his room, might hear us. What would he think if he overheard?" That was my main concern. Nevertheless, if I didn't confront him now, he wouldn't grasp the gravity of the situation. It was too easy for him to shatter our happiness and pursue his own. I couldn't let that happen. I wanted to snatch away his happiness, just as ours had been taken from us. Motivated by these thoughts, I decided to confront Ted with a truth that would stun him. "I hate to break it to you, but isn't Ken your son?" Ted said confidently. "He's not mine." "What are you talking about? We're married, so any child of ours is our child," Ted asserted, looking smug. I was left speechless for a moment. Is this guy clueless? He's 4 years older than me and still so ignorant. I sighed deeply, surprised by his lack of understanding, and decided to lay out the truth for him. "Ken is your child with your ex-wife, right? So what? In other words, Ken is your stepchild to me. To legally be considered a parent to a stepchild, you would need to adopt them." Adoption. Ted furrowed his brow, clearly perplexed. Typically, stepchildren remain just that, stepchildren. Without legal adoption, there are no parental rights or inheritance rights. Socially, they might be seen as your children, but legally, there's no obligation. When I married you, Ted, I didn't adopt Ken. That's why I can't take him with me. Wait, hold on. So does that mean I have to take care of Ken? Ted asked, visibly startled. That seems to be the case. While you wouldn't be legally charged with parental negligence just for leaving him alone, Ken is at an age where parents have responsibilities to raise their children, I explained calmly. Ted looked stunned. Come on, that can't be right. What do you mean? I have a baby on the way. I plan to live with my newborn and my soon-to-be wife, just the three of us. That was the condition for marrying Kay. Oh, so the woman you cheated with is named Kay. So, that has nothing to do with me. It has everything to do with you. This could all be resolved if you just take care of Ken. But I've told you I can't, Ted insisted. Just find a way. Please don't ruin my happiness, he pleaded. I couldn't believe his audacity. After destroying our happiness, he had the nerve to beg for his own. Through clenched teeth, I responded firmly to Ted. No matter what you say, what can't be done can't be done. You should discuss this with your girlfriend, Kay. You're truly heartless. Fine, you'll regret this, Ted retorted angrily. He slammed his hand on the table and stormed out of the room, grabbing his cell phone as he went. I followed him with my eyes and noticed him making a call in the hallway. That's why. Yeah, that's right. So, I could hear Ted's muffled voice on the phone. Eventually, he returned and announced, just wait, I'm bringing Kay over. What? You're bringing her here? Of course. Since you're refusing to budge, I have no other choice, Ted snapped angrily, seeming to justify his actions. It was clear he didn't believe he was at fault. Well, at least this might expedite the discussion on dividing our property. With that thought, I silently watched Ted leave. An hour later, Ted returned with a woman in tow. As I stole a glance at her, she greeted me with a look of discontent. Hi, she muttered, avoiding eye contact. I could empathize with her discomfort. Meeting the spouse of the person you're having an affair with couldn't be pleasant under any circumstances. Sure enough, Kay turned out to be the woman who had been with Ted in his car that day. I couldn't deny that my thoughts drifted to blaming her for all this. But thanks to her involvement, I had a chance to bring Ted down a notch. With that realization, a smile involuntarily crossed my face. I pondered how to initiate the conversation, but Kay spoke first. You're Mila, right? Don't you think your child is adorable? You've lived together for about 13 years, haven't you? Are you talking about Ken? If so, I do think he's adorable. I consider him as much my child as if he were my own. Then why are you abandoning him? You should take him with you, Kay asserted, her voice tinged with tension. I could see beads of sweat forming on her forehead. I knew it. Her words condemned me, but deep down, she didn't truly mean it. I recalled the findings of the investigation into Ted's behavior. If the information about Kay's current situation was accurate, her motives for arguing like this made perfect sense. So, I decided to assert my position firmly. I would love to take Ken with me, but no matter how much I adore him and consider him my own, legally, only Ted is Ken's parent. I cannot assume parental rights over Ken. But, yes, there's also the option of not proceeding with the divorce, and you would have to raise your child alone, I continued. Kay visibly flinched at this. She turned to Ted and murmured, I can't raise a baby on my own. Don't worry, I'll take care of our child. Plus, I'm definitely getting divorced and I want to be with you, Ted interjected confidently. I couldn't let him brush off the divorce so easily. Hold on, it hasn't been decided whether we're getting a divorce yet. Shut up. I'm definitely getting a divorce, Ted insisted. So, are you planning to take Ken with you? We'll discuss that later. We're not making any progress here. Okay, what are your thoughts? I directed the question to Kay. She frowned and replied, I can't raise someone else's child. Even if it's the child of the man you love, I pressed. Of course not. I love Ted, not some child of Ted and another woman, Kay declared firmly. Oh, I see, but isn't your argument a bit strange? I challenged. Why? Kay replied, clearly unsettled. You don't want to raise someone else's child. That's your personal choice, and I respect that. But are you okay with making Ted raise another person's child? Kay's face suddenly paled at my words. Ted looked puzzled. What are you talking about? I'm talking about the baby. Kay's baby in her belly. This child is mine. I've told you that before. You did say that, but it doesn't make sense. According to my investigation, the father of Kay's child should be another man. Ted turned sharply towards Kay, his expression intense. She avoided eye contact, her face drained of color. The absurdity of the situation almost made me want to laugh. Ted pressed Kay, his voice demanding. Is what she said true? What? About the father of the child? Don't be ridiculous. The father of this child is you, Ted, Kay retorted, banging her hand on the table. But I calmly interjected. That's not true. I have proof. Look, with that, I placed a single photo on the table. It was a picture obtained from a private investigation showing Kay conversing with an unknown man in front of an obstetrician's office. With a private investigation, they also check if you're cheating. According to that, you have a man you're seeing. The child in your belly, it's his, isn't it? I confronted Kay. I mean, Kay stuttered, clearly unable to find words. Ted, observing the exchange, seemed to grasp the truth and slumped in despair. So, you're suggesting I should divorce Mila and raise someone else's child? Kay, are you okay with that? Ted asked, his voice tinged with bitterness. No, no way, Kay replied, shaking her head vehemently. Don't forget about Ken, okay? I interjected firmly. Ted then turned to me desperately. Wait, let's get back together, Mila. If I break up with her, you won't divorce, right? What? You're saying whatever suits you. Sorry, but I was already planning to divorce, so this comes at the right time. And I'll be seeking a fair division of our property, I asserted, slamming down the evidence of their infidelity on the table. The photos laid bare their betrayal, including pictures of Kay with the unknown man. Ted grabbed one of the photos and yelled at Kay, "You deceitful woman. You've ruined everything." That's my line. You should have realized I might prefer a younger man. I thought I could just take the money and leave if I had to raise the child, Kay shot back defiantly. Caught in their own turmoil, Ted and Kay started arguing loudly. Fed up with their drama, I intervened sharply, "Take your fight somewhere else," and ushered them out of the house. After that, I made my way to Ken's room. I gently knocked on the door and Ken peered out. I'm sorry you had to hear that conversation, I began. Yeah, I heard. But that's on Dad, not you. It's not your fault. I'm fine, really. Next year, I'll be in college, and I'll make Dad pay for the move, and then do whatever I want, Ken said with a slight smile. He seemed more grown-up than I had realized, and it eased my worries to see his maturity. However, Ted hadn't matured at all. Despite my attempts to reach out, he continued to ignore my calls. Days passed without any change. With negotiations stalled and Ted absent from home, I felt increasingly troubled. I decided to visit Ted's workplace, but I didn't want to just show up unannounced. So I contacted Ted's boss, Mr. Wilson, before heading over. Upon arrival at the company, Mr. Wilson promptly received me and called Ted and Kay into his office. Facing them both, I addressed Ted directly. You know why I'm here, right? What's the matter? Ted replied, nonchalantly shrugging his shoulders. Kay, on the other hand, had remained silent since arriving. You seem worried about your boyfriend finding out about your relationship with Ted, Kay. Well, he probably already knows, considering you're here. I smirked slightly, watching as Kay's expression fell. It was inevitable that her affair would be exposed, especially since the man she truly loved also worked at the same company. Ted resisted until the last moment, but finally relented after a stern word from Mr. Wilson, agreeing to cooperate with the divorce proceedings. Well, I'll be heading home now, I announced, preparing to leave. Ted couldn't resist expressing his dissatisfaction. Showing up at my workplace? Seriously, if this damages my reputation, what then? The fault lies with you, not me. Besides, having an affair isn't grounds for dismissal. But if word gets around the office, it could complicate things for you here. However, that's not my concern. I'm here solely to discuss the divorce. Whether Ted decides to stay or leave his job is up to him, just as it is for Kay. Well, good luck with that, I added dismissively before turning and leaving Ted and Kay to their own devices in the office. After settling the division of property with Ted through my lawyer, I received some troubling news from Mr. Wilson shortly after leaving his office. Apparently, news of Ted and Kay's affair had quickly spread throughout the company. Predictably, Kay's boyfriend found out, leading to a heated confrontation that ended their relationship on the spot. Injured by her breakup, Kay demanded compensation from Ted, accusing him of mental abuse. Naturally, Ted refused to comply, and their dispute escalated into a messy legal battle. With their affair now public and the court involved, Both Ted and Kay eventually left the company. Ted struggled to find new employment due to his age and settled for a part-time position at a local shop. Meanwhile, Kay, reportedly pregnant, retreated to her parents' home. Neither could hold their heads high as they awaited the court's ruling. In contrast, things were looking up for me. My boss even proposed that I return as a full-time employee, which I gladly accepted. I'm now fully committed to my work, and my relationship with Ken is thriving as he prepares diligently for college. When he mentioned having a girlfriend and wanting me to meet her, I asked if he still considered me his mother figure. Even though Ted is my dad, Ken replied, I respect you more as a parent. Currently, my focus is on supporting Ken as he prepares for the next chapter of his life in college.